Welcome to Hope Here. My name is Greg Horn. We are looking at the first miracle of Jesus, the miracle where Jesus turned the water into wine. And yesterday, we're basing this off of John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. And yesterday, we I wanted to share 6 things that I think we can learn from Jesus' first miracle when he turned the water into wine. We got to 2 of those yesterday. Giving you a little background, just in case you're not familiar with that. Jesus' first miracle was about turning the water into the wine. They were at a wedding, and they ran out of wine. And the 2 things I shared yesterday, just in case you missed yesterday's program, was number 1, Jesus liked to have fun. Jesus liked to have fun. And I just shared that as a type A personality and as a pastor and executive director of Hope is Here Ministries and the voice of Lexington Christian Academy high school football and basketball, that my calendar is pretty busy. And yet, it just was one of those things that Jesus went to a wedding and said the disciples in verse 1 were invited too. And so that meant they have fun. And we talked about we need to be intentional about having fun. The Bible says a cheerful heart is good medicine to the soul. Obviously, research shows that doctors have done and things that it's good for our physical bodies, our mental and our emotional health to have fun and to laugh. And I've been doing a lot better job this year in 2020-25 about being intentional and scheduling fun things to do because I deal with a lot of heavy ministry stuff and I'm honored that God didn't trust me with that, but I need to be intentional and have fun. Second thing we talked about is that my timing's not always God's timing. Jesus' mom, verse 3 said, hey, they've ran out of wine, which was a big just disaster because weddings then went on for a week. They weren't just a 2 or 3 hour afternoon thing. And wine was a big part of that and that culture. And so Jesus' mom went to him and said, they have no more wine in verse 3 of John chapter 2. And Jesus replied, dear woman, that's not our problem. My time has not yet come. And we talked about yesterday that, my timing's not always God's timing. Can I get a witness on that? And amen. Oh, so many times like, God, what are you waiting on? And yet God's timing is usually not my timing. But we also talked about that Jesus' mom didn't get offended by the way he responded because, it was a little disrespectful. I mean, we can't hear the tone, but by the words. But she just doesn't miss a beat, goes on in verse 5 and said that his mom told the servants, do whatever Jesus tells you to. And we talked about, are you offended? Jesus' mom could have been offended, but she didn't. She wasn't. And, we also talked about maybe we need to give Jesus a little grace here because, Jesus knew once he did his first miracle, then the clock would start ticking on his walk to the cross and just a brutal, horrific death, a crucifixion on a cross. So you got to understand, you can imagine just the mental, emotional anguish that Jesus was going through when he had to realize when he does his first miracle, it is game on, okay? His life's changing forever, and it's going to be ending in a short time later. So those are the first 2 things we talked about we can learn from Jesus' first miracle, turning water into wine. I want to share 4 other things today that I think we can learn from this first miracle. And the next one I want to share with you today, starting with, is be prepared when Jesus asks you to act. Be prepared when Jesus asks you to act. Verse 5 there, it talks about standing nearby, there were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. And Jesus told the servants, fill the jars with water. Let me pause for a moment. I know some of you are thinking, okay, Greg, help me out here. I hear what you're saying. I do want to be prepared when Jesus asks me to act. But how do I do that, Greg? Well, friends, the best way that you can do that is that, honestly, just spending time with God. And really need to do it each day. I mean, I'm not talking about getting perfect attendance, checking boxes. But, friends, the very one that gave you breath this morning, okay, he wants to speak to you. And I'm going to share a verse. I'm going to share 3 verses, actually. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. Most people that are followers of Jesus are familiar with that. But I'm going to add in there 12, 13, and 14 because so many times we just stop at verse 11 in Jeremiah chapter 29. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity." You know, one time, I read that verse for several years, but then one time, a few years ago when I was reading it, it just jumped out on me that the word plans is in that one verse, Jeremiah 29:11, 3 times in one verse. And I just felt like God said, "Hey, Greg, I do have a plan for your life. I want to make sure you know that." So I put that word in there, not once, not twice, but 3 times, because I know sometimes you're not focusing, you're not paying attention. And then as I've gotten older, I've learned that, friends, you know, we want to hear that one big plan for our whole life. And friends, sometimes we get that, but I've found that, man, God's had different plans for different seasons of my life. I think about the plan in my 20s, and then in my 30s, then in the decade of my 40s. And now I'm getting ready to complete my 5th decade here this year, just in a few months. Unbelievable. And yet, I think the plan even for this season of my life is different. And I'm so thankful, friends, that, you know, God's got a plan. He's got a plan for each season of our life. And he says, hey, if you'll call on me and come to pray to me, I will listen to you. And that's what I'm trying to say, the importance of spending time with God. If you want to know the plan for his life and be prepared when Jesus wants you to act, just like these servants had to be prepared. Somebody say, you know, Greg, I'm tired of waiting, man. And I appreciate your honesty. I get it. I've been there. I get that. But I'm going to share some of the people that God used most in the Bible, how long they had to wait. Joseph waited 13 years. Abraham waited 25 years. Moses waited 40 years. Jesus waited 30 years. If God is making you wait, friends, then you're in good company. I'm going to say it again. If God is causing you to wait in this season of life before he moves, you're in good company. And, you know, one of the things I've learned as I've gotten older, sometimes once God has eventually answered a prayer, sometimes it's been several years, you know what he was actually doing? He was sometimes, it wasn't me he was waiting on. Maybe, yes, for at first he was, but after a while, he's like, okay, Greg, I think your heart and mind are in the right place. But there was somebody else's life he was working in that he had to change and tweak some things and heal some things in their life before he could move in the situation that affected my life. So, friends, be encouraged by that today. And I know sometimes you say, well, Greg, what do I do while I'm waiting on God to ask me to act? Just keep showing up and doing the next right thing. Whatever God puts in front of you, how simple that is, just do it. And whatever that is, it may be signing up to volunteer at children's ministry at your church. Okay, it may be calling a friend that's going through a tough time and just calling and just listening to them, even though you're like, man, you know, you don't have the answer for their situation because it's not a area in your life that you've had experience. Friends, I'm learning. You don't have to know what to say. As the old saying goes, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And that's so important, friends. So I want to encourage you by that. Just do the next right thing. It's helping a single parent out with a gift card to Walmart or Kroger to help them provide groceries and other things they might need at their house. Okay? Sometimes God asks us to do crazy things like give somebody a car. We got an extra used car. I mean, I don't know what it is, but you and God know. And just be patient while you're waiting and know that God will show you what to do next. But be patient while you're waiting on him to act. Number 4, you never know what God might use to help you. You say, what do you mean by that? Well, it's amazing, this miracle, Jesus' first miracle, okay, that he did, which then the disciples were like, okay, he is definitely Son of God. Yeah, he called us to come follow me. But after seeing this miracle done, they're like, okay, now I really believe. I believe, B-E-L-I-E-V-E in capital letters, exclamation point, right? But verse 6, it says, standing nearby, there were 6 stone water jars. And these are usually used for ceremonial washing. which was very frequent in the Jewish culture. So this would have been the last thing that you would have thought that Jesus would have used to make wine in, to drink at a wedding. But here's what I love about being a follower of Jesus. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 25 through 27, it says, "For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength." I love that. Then he goes on to say, "Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you called. Not many of you were wise by human standards, and not many were very influential. Not many were of noble birth, but God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise, and God chose the weak things of this world to shame the strong." Friends, in other words, God does not do things the way we do them. And, I thought something just kind of just ironic, and it's not biblical or spiritual, but I just thought about that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, and what a great movie that was many years ago. But, if you hadn't seen it, he was a FedEx pilot, delivered cargo, packages, things, people needed shipped, and it wound up wrecking, and he was stranded on this deserted island by himself for 4 years. But one of the things that was being delivered was a volleyball, and it was in a box, and he tore the volleyball out of the box, and Tom Hanks cut his hand with a knife as he was trying to cut a coconut to have something to eat or drink, and he used the blood to paint a face on this volleyball, and then with his blood, then he poked little holes, with white to clear the blood for the eyes, and little white dot for nose, and then drew a little half circle for a smile like it was his mouth. And he talked to this volleyball. He called it Wilson. It was a Wilson volleyball. And so, friends, it was kind of funny that he did that. And it winds up that, that's what God, and this was a spiritual movie by any stretch, but it did show to me that God can use anything sometimes to help us get it through a tough time. A fifth thing to learn from the first miracle Jesus created when he turned the water into wine, often God doesn't do things the way we would do them. He just doesn't. Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8 and 9. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." Oh, friends, the verse has been so powerful for me in times in my life when I just didn't understand God, but I could trust Isaiah 55 and 8 and 9. And the way God did that, they used the best wine. That's what the master of ceremonies thought. Jesus told the servants to take it to him, and that's what the master of ceremony said. Most people use their best wine, then once people have had their fill and, are intoxicated, then they bring out the cheap stuff that doesn't taste good. He said, no, you've done it differently. And, just amazing way of how God just does things totally different than we would do them. He wants to do that in your life today, friends. And last but not least, in verse 11, it talked about this miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee. It was the first time Jesus revealed his glory and his disciples believed in him. That was the first sign. And I want you to think about some signs that Jesus has done in your life. Okay? There have been times in your life that Jesus just did some, but you've forgotten about, and Satan wants you to forget about. But I remember some signs, some times that God made a way when there seemed to be no way. And I want you to be encouraged today that God can do that again and do another miracle in your life, just like he did when Jesus turned the water into the wine 2,000 years ago. My name's Greg Horn, and this is Hope is Here.